Hello, my name is Felipe Rafael Foster Mendoza. I'm a student from Universidad Popular Autónoma del Estado de Puebla. The subject is Advanced Calculus. My teacher is Anselmo Chávez Lopez, and today's topic is going to be the demonstration of trigonometric derivatives. So as you know, there is some derivative rules in which says the behavior of these ones. For example, the sine of x, we know that is the cosine of x, but we are going to make the demonstration by using the definition of derivative, which says that the limit of delta x tends to 0 is equal to the fx plus delta x minus fx over delta x. Then, as we already know the value of fx, we are going to substitute by saying the sine of x plus delta x minus the sine of x over delta x. So now we are going to use the Newton law of sines that says the sine of a plus b is equal to the sine of a multiplied by the cosine of b plus the cosine of a plus the sine of b. So if we substitute this in the original equation, we have the limit of delta x tends to 0 will be equal to the sine of x multiplied by the cosine of delta x plus the cosine of a plus by the sine of delta x minus the sine of x all divided by delta x. So now we can also factorize this equation to the limit of sine x by the cosine of delta x minus 1 over delta x plus the limit of delta x tends to 0 of the cosine by the cosine of x by the sine of delta x over delta x. So once again we can factorize this by saying that minus the limit of delta x tends to 0 of 1 minus the cosine of delta x over delta x multiplied by the limit of delta x tends to 0 of the sine of sine x plus the limit of delta x of cosine x is the sine of delta x over the limit of delta x tends to 0, and now the sine of delta x over delta x. So Now if we apply the limit, we know that this value will be equal to 0 and this value will be equal to 1. So by making the substitution, we know that minus 0 by the sine of x plus the cosine of x multiplied by 1, as any number multiplied by 0 is 0 and any number multiplied by 1 is the same one. We have that the derivative of sin x is the cosine of x. So now what happens if we want to do this the same process but with the cosine of x? So the only thing that we are going to do is change the law of Newton of the cosine, that is equal to the cosine of A by the cosine of B plus the sine of A multiplied by the sine of B. So we have that the cosine of A multiplied by the cosine of B plus, okay, here is minus the sine of, here the value of cosine is x and here is delta x, minus the sine of x by the sine of delta x, minus the cosine of x over delta x. Now we factorize this by saying the minus limit is the 1 minus the cosine of delta x over delta x, and this multiplied by the limit of delta x tends to 0 of the cosine of x plus, minus the limit when delta x tends to 0 of the sine of x multiplied by the limit of delta x tends to 0 of the sine of delta x over delta x, as we saw in the previous equation. So as the previous one, we apply the limit here and say that this value will be equal to 0 and this will be equal to 1. So once again we rewrite the equation by saying that minus 0 multiplied by the cosine of x minus the sine of x multiplied by 1. So as any number multiplied by 0 is 0 and any number multiplied by 1 is the same one, we will have that the derivative of cosine x is minus the sine of x. So that will be everything by this video. Thank you and see you next time.